You found it, the best place for live, local, conservative talk in the morning. The Commute with Carlson. Stimulating, entertaining, and making a difference. Here's John Carlson on Talk Radio 570 KVI.
Five minutes after 7 o'clock, the Commute with Carlson, Talk Radio 570 KVI. Yes, phone lines open 206-421-5757. That's 206-421-5757. Outside King County, 1-888-312-5757. That's 1-888-312-5757. Haven't opened the phone lines until now to ask people to sound off on Baltimore what you thought when you were watching all this mayhem breaking loose. The good news we have is, according to David Curley, ABC News correspondent, my old friend and colleague from years back when we were both doing television on Channel 7, he said that he does not think you're going to see a repeat tonight of what happened last night. He said that there are now thousands of police from various jurisdictions, including National Guardsmen, State Patrol, local police, county police, and their overwhelming presence, he believes, will smother any outbreak of the kind of mayhem and looting and arson that we saw last night. 15 police officers injured, 2 still in the hospital. I haven't heard reports of injured looters and rioters yet. One guy who caught my attention, this was on CNN. He's, tall, skinny, elderly black guy in a baseball cap, was standing up in front of the cops, facing down the looters and yelling at them, telling them to go home. And the CNN reporter moved in to ask him, who are you? And here's what he told him.
Sir, who are you?
Just a soldier.
You heard him say, I'm just a soldier. Very quietly, very modestly. He's just standing there. Not armed. He was just standing there in his town trying to protect the streets. Joe Johns from CNN continued talking to the guy.
And you sort of took it upon yourself to tell those young people to go away.
Yes.
Well, when you're a little bit concerned about your own safety, I mean, there's a lot of bottles and rocks and things.
Look, here's number one. I did 30 years, okay?
He said, here's number one. I did 30 years. He's talking about his military career where he ended as Master Sergeant.
Came out of Master Sergeant. I've seen more than all this. I've been through the riots already. This right here is not relevant. They need to have their butts at home. They need to be in their home units with their families studying and doing something with their life. Not out here protesting about something that's not really about nothing. They do not respect this young man's death. Now, mama and daddy then lost a child. That could be them.
He said they don't respect this young man's death. Mommy and daddy, meaning Freddie Gray's parents, lost a child, but it could have been them. Talking about the rioters.
So I'm very pissed.
So what's your name?
Valentine.
And what's your first name?
Robert.
Robert Valentine. So you're a Vietnam vet?
Yes.
And you just decided to come out here and stand up against these guys?
Yes.
A lot of people would think twice, wouldn't they?
I love my country. I love my charm city. And I'm an American. I'm not black, white, red, or yellow, nothing. I am American.
Are you concerned about what's happening to the community?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Valentine. Anderson, back to you.
I got to say, Mr. Valentine is just a hero tonight.
He really was, with such a marked contrast with everything else that people were seeing. And by the way, this guy was not asking for media attention. He clearly, you heard, he wasn't volunteering any information. It was the reporter was extracting it, from the guy. He was the whole time he was talking to the reporter. He wasn't talking to the reporter. I mean, he was talking to the reporter while he was looking at the protesters. He was focused on what he was there to do.
You know, one other thing that occurred to me after, and I heard about this Vietnam veteran, what he did last night, but then I heard his actual words in the CNN interview a little bit earlier this morning. But it almost was the visual aspect of it, independent of what he was saying. He's standing there facing a group of looters that are either just kind of staring down the police officers in riot gear, and he's yelling at them, go home, don't continue to destroy this neighborhood. It was almost like that one guy in Tiananmen Square, standing
in front of the tank.
Exactly. In 1989, whatever it was, standing there in front of the tank. A single solitary person trying to be, the voice of reason.
Well, we've seen two images there. The first was Mr. Valentine, the Vietnam vet, 35 years. He said, I've seen rioting. I've seen far worse than this. And he was completely fearless. Just out there. Yeah, I mean, you've got all these police officers standing with their shields up, in the background, and then you've got this guy just standing there in front of them. And then you had the mom, who dressed in yellow, who saw her son on camera rioting, and she walks into the crowd and basically pushes and drags him out of the crowd. Those are two hopeful images, but everything else was so depressing to look at and so infuriating.
Yeah, the video, and I know Brittany found it a little bit earlier. We'll have to see if we can get it linked up on
amateur politicians there in Baltimore.
Well, yeah. But the video of this mom going after her son is just spectacular. So, I mean, it's almost... She doesn't actually physically grab him by the ear and pull him out.
Pretty close.
But it's one of those motherhood moments about, what are you doing? Get out of that. Get out of here.
So anyway, there were some interesting comments made according to AP, the Baltimore Sun. There were a group of men wearing blue bandanas, blue shirts, said they were members of the Crips, who were denouncing the looting, saying, this is our hood, we can't control it right now. There were other people who were saying that the looting and the rioting, quote, was absolutely horrible. They aren't doing it for Freddie Gray. They're taking an opportunity for personal gain. They're tearing up their own neighborhood. And they did. Setting fires. They burned a senior center. This was one of my favorite sound bites. After several fires had been set and, fire department personnel attacked with rocks when they came to put out the fires, you may have seen the video of this one thug wearing a gas mask and a red hoodie who is stabbing a fire hose with a knife. So that it'll be harder to put out the fires. But while all this is going on, all this mayhem, you had this large fire consuming a partly built development project of the Southern Baptist Church, the senior home that you heard about. And the mayor, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, arrived at the scene and said, we don't know if it's related to the riots. Well, if not, it sure is an amazing coincidence. A couple of thoughts here, and I'm going to be a contrarian on this one. We've had the riots in Ferguson and the unrest in New York and here in Baltimore, and people say, well, you see, it's because of the cops. It's because of the violence. It's because young black men feel that they're victimized by the police. I don't think that's the foundation of all this. I think those are the flashpoints. but I don't think they're the cause of all this. We are 6.5 years now into an administration that, when Barack Obama took over with the votes of over 90% of the African American community, the hopes were that everything was going to get better, that things were going to turn around in a very big way. And African Americans were finally, someone who finally understands and empathizes and puts as a first priority the well-being of black Americans is now leading this country, one of our own. What has happened? What has happened is that the constituency of Americans that supported Barack Obama more than any other are the ones who have been the most hurt by the policies of the last 5 years. I mean, whether you look at it is in how blacks compared to whites, or if you just simply look at the state of African Americans generally, their wealth has fallen further under this president than under any president since the Depression. Since 2009, non-white household income in this country has dropped by almost a tenth. The median non-white family today has a net worth of $18,000. That's a fifth lower than it was when Barack Obama took office. Median wealth for white households, on the other hand, has actually now inched up by 1%. If you know, no matter what statistic you look at, you can't escape the reality. For instance, the unemployment rate is about 6% for America at large. For African Americans, 11.4%, the highest jobless rate among any Americans. In dollar terms, median black household income fell by $3,000, more than any other Americans. No matter what statistic you look at, African Americans have fared worse under Barack Obama than anyone else. And I think that there is a deep sense of frustration. They're not going to blame Obama. Obama is the only sector of Americans who still give him favorable ratings are African Americans. But they are doing worse under Obama than anybody else.
If you were President Obama's advisor yesterday afternoon and into the evening, would you have urged President Obama to make a on-camera national address, or at least to hold a press conference to say something about the looting and how things transpired in Baltimore yesterday? Would you have advised your president to do that if you were a White House advisor?
First of all, you wouldn't need an advisor. A real leader would have been out there. A real leader would have stood up and addressed this early on. And it's a sign of Barack Obama's narcissism. I don't want to get too pulled into that right now, that he isn't. So again, my take on all this is that the incidents with police are the tripwires. They're the flashpoints for violence flaring out among African American neighborhoods. But I think that the real basis for this is that no group of Americans have fared worse under the policies of the last 5 years, 6 years, than African Americans. And it's created an undercurrent of frustration and resentment and just waiting for something to, spark the tinder. And unfortunately, I think what it means is we're going to be seeing more and more of this. In Ferguson, when the riots were underway, there were all sorts of blame was cast at the fact, well, this is, a largely white-run city with an African-American majority. And you see that kind of frustration building. What's the excuse in Baltimore? You've got a city that has been controlled and run by African-Americans for a long time. I don't think it's really just the cops. I don't think cops all of a sudden decided to get mean in the last few years, and it's created a problem. I think that there is an undercurrent, a mood of frustration, a mood of anxiety that has been there for a while, and that has been building, and this is where it's been breaking out.
Somebody's got to stand up for what's right. This is Talk Radio 570 KVI.
The irony doesn't stop with African-American voters. Again, we're talking about African-American voters who are more loyal to Barack Obama than any other voting constituency in both 2008 and 2012. Yet they have unquestionably, by any measure, fared worse under this president's policies than anybody. But it doesn't stop there. You look at single women. Single moms gave 67% of their vote to Obama. 67%. They have seen their incomes fall by roughly 5%. Young voters used to love Obama. This is the constituency that he has lost a greater share from than any other. They gave him 60% of their votes. They've seen their incomes decline 4.4%. So the young voters, single women, and African Americans were the strongest supporters of Barack Obama, and they are the ones who have fared worse under his policies than anyone else. Let's go to Doug in Spanaway. Hello, how are you, Doug? Nice to have you here.
Yeah, John, I just think you need to look at it as he's not going to call these people off. I mean, they're the ones that put him in there. It's the world that owes him a living crowd, just like he came up in. And he has no reason to call him off, He's the one that's pretty much enticed a lot of this from the beginning, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'll tell you this much. This is, I think, Barack Obama's biggest failure, is that I think a lot of people believed that the sign of Barack Obama being elected president was a definite move forward for America's race relations, and things would get even better. And instead, they've gone the other way. And some of the blame there belongs to Barack Obama, because he's playing to African Americans off the same script that Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton use. That's not what we expected from someone who in 2004 gave that electrifying speech at the Democratic convention that nominated John Kerry, when he said there is no black or white America, there's just the United States of America, and brought the crowd out of its seats. On at least 3 occasions, 3 incidents, we have seen him rush to judgment on race issues. The Henry Louis Gates episode at Cambridge, the professor who was locked out of his house was trying to break into his house, and the police show up and ask him what he's up to, and he throws a temper tantrum, and Obama blamed the cops. The cops did nothing wrong. The Trayvon Martin case, where the president spoke before having his facts straight. And, of course, Ferguson, which he brought up as a human rights issue. The shooting of Michael Brown, only to learn later from his own Justice Department that Officer Darren Wilson did absolutely nothing wrong. And in fact, I'll tell you something. If President Obama really wanted to be a leader and heal racial wounds, you know what he would do? Is he would publicly exonerate Officer Wilson. He would say, I think we now need to know that a lot of people spoke without having the facts corrected, and a lot of people continue to labor under the misconception that Officer Wilson did something wrong. He did not do anything wrong. But again, that would take a leader, and on this as well as so many issues, we know that Barack Obama just isn't a leader. Here real quickly is just another great moment we talked about earlier where a mother found her son among the looters in Baltimore and yelled at him to get out of the crowd and go home.
You want to be out here doing this dumb shit? Get the over here! Get over here now! You hear what I said? He was prepared for this. He got his all black on, got the gloves, face mask, and look who beside him, his mother. Goddamn.
That was a witness who was observing the mom. We'll just play a couple seconds of the mom.
You out here doing this dumb shit? Get the over here!
All right. The line's open here, 206-421-5757. That's 206-421-5757. Outside King County, 1-888-312-5757. Wanting to remind you, by the way, that today is Election Day. And a lot of people aren't aware of it because here's why. There are property tax increases on ballots throughout the Puget Sound area. They are city, they are county-wide, they are school district-wide. Check and see your ballot, and you can fill it out today and still get it in, and it will count. Again, but you've got to drop it in the mailbox today. One of the ballot measures is Proposition 1 in King County. Proposition 1 in King County is that police emergency radio project. Here is the ballot title for it. King County Council passed ordinance, blah, 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 concerning funding for a new upgraded regional radio network would provide funding to replace the current aging emergency radio network used for dispatching and communicating with fire, police, and other first responders. And basically, it would cost the average person about $25 or so a piece, $25 per household. Is this a good expense? Yes. Could you say it's a necessary expense? You could. Why are a lot of people voting no? Because if it is exactly what they say, necessary and a basic fundamental expense of government, why is it being levied as a frill? Levies are not supposed to pay for basic government services. Okay, we're talking about the emergency radio network for police, fire, Medic 1, and other first responders. Dick Reed, former director of the Seattle Police Department 911 Center, said, public safety radio should be the last thing you worry about in an emergency. At the SPU shooting, the radios got in the way. And he's correct about that. The question is, why would the county treat this as, oh, yeah, if you want that, you'll have to pay an extra $26 a year? Why would that not be we've got to make this a necessary priority? It only takes a simple majority to pass, and everybody is for it, all the police, all of the law enforcement, and you understand why. You want them to have the best equipment possible. But, they do the same thing with the 911, the AFIS system. They do the same thing with the rapid fingerprinting, the same. Everything that should be treated as a necessary, fundamental expense of government is treated as an extra, an add-on. Oh, did you want that too? Well, that'll be an extra $25 on your property tax bill. But that is what is going on right now. So, again, check your voter's pamphlet, check your ballot. You got to get it in today. Throughout the Puget Sound area, there's a host of property tax increases at either the city level or the county level or the school district level or, special district, water district, what have you. They're all over the place. And you just need to know about it. King County, by the way, on its website, warning people about a new public health emergency. What is the public health emergency? Gun ownership. If you go to the King County website, you'll see the headline, Gun Violence in King County. More than 31,000 people in the United States are killed by gun violence each year. In King County, the death toll is more than 125 people a year. More people in King County die from gun violence than motor vehicle crashes. Now, what they don't do is break it out for you. How many of those are suicides? The answer is most. How many of those are justifiable homicides, either at the hands of police or people protecting themselves? They don't say. Anyway, they say despite these deaths and injuries by gun violence, there are reasons. It's like the gun is hunting down people and shooting them seemingly by themselves. There are reasons to be optimistic we can solve this public health threat. In the past 20 years, our nation has come together to dramatically decrease deaths from smoking and car crashes. We have created safer cars equipped with airbags and required child seats, etc., etc. We can take similar health approaches to reducing gun violence. You know what? What a great idea. How did we cut down on smoking and drunk driving? Personal responsibility. That is. Did we ban cigarettes? Did we ban automobiles? Do we try and restrict access to automobiles? So looking at this, it's just straight propaganda. And what on earth it is doing on the King County? Well, of course, we know what it's doing on the King County website. It's unfortunately what the King County website conveys in a whole host of areas. But the bottom line on this is that King County is actually going against public sentiment. Have you seen the latest polls? 2 years, almost 2 years to the day, that President Obama proposed federal gun controls and tried to link them to Sandy Hook Elementary, the awful Newtown, Connecticut school shooting. 2 years later, after the failure of that legislation, the public is showing virtually unprecedented support for gun ownership as a predicate to keeping homes safer. For the first time in memory, more than half Americans believe that homes are safer when there's a gun inside than without. Keep in mind, a majority of Americans don't own firearms. You keep hearing about, well, there's 250 to 300 million firearms in this country. Yeah, but, some people own 40. But a solid majority of Americans do not own firearms, and yet a majority of Americans now believe that a home with a firearm in it is likely to be a safer home than one without. We haven't seen those numbers, not in at least 20 years. Gives you an idea that Americans really have been educated about this issue, despite the virtual, nonstop propaganda, the type that I just read to you, coming right off the King County government website. We have our winner, John in Chehalis. A farmer is going to be stepping off the tractor a little early and driving out to Linwood Motorplex to hang out with us at the KVI Listener Appreciation Bash coming up on Thursday. That's right in front of you. By the way, the Macaw Indian tribe wants to hunt more whales. Who is trying to stop them? Well, there was a hearing on this, and it was very interesting sound bites going back and forth. That's part of what we have right in front of you here on the Commute with Carlson Talk Radio 570 KVI.
Passion, principles, politics. This is Talk Radio 570, KVI.
You know, if you have a chance to check it out, go on to Real Clear Politics and download Heather McDonald's piece in the New York Post. It's entitled The Perilous New Push to Excuse Lawlessness. And she's talking about how in the wake of riots that have happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and New York, there's always an agenda that is being pushed. And the agenda is always to excuse people for lawless behavior. She said the pretext for the current decriminalization movement is the half-dozen highly publicized deaths of blacks in encounters with police over the past 9 months, including the case of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. That case triggered widespread looting and rioting last night, but every police killing has been leveraged to argue for less enforcement and less consequences for unlawful behavior. In New York City, the city council is now crafting legislation that would decriminalize public order offenses as turnstile jumping, public urination, and public drinking. The proposed legislation is a response to the death of Eric Garner during an arrest for selling untaxed cigarettes last July. Such quality of life policing, the supporters claim, is unfair as it burdens minority communities and leads to such horrors as the death of Eric Garner. But the NYPD's public order enforcement is driven by community demands. It turns out that 911 calls complaining of disorderly conditions come overwhelmingly from minority neighborhoods. Minimizing the consequences for lawless behavior would require ignoring the wishes of the very residents whom the public advocates claim to represent. Those law-abiding residents understand several things that the activists and the New York City Council does not. First, quality of life offenses not only make a neighborhood unlivable, they invite more serious crimes. That's the so-called broken windows theory. And second, police are needed to fend off chaos in communities where family controls have broken down. The shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri last month prompted a nationwide movement to scale back penalties for ditching a court appearance or failing to pay criminal and traffic fines, though the shooting had nothing to do with those issues. After the Justice Department eviscerated the lie that Officer Darren Wilson had gunned down Brown in cold blood while he was trying to surrender, Attorney General Eric Holder was determined to justify the Ferguson riots anyway. He announced in March that black residents in Ferguson are oppressed by more generalized racism, emanating from allegedly draconian penalties for court delinquency and non-payment of fines. A black mayor of another small Missouri town defended his own town's traffic and court fees, to the New York Times saying, everyone's saying, oh no, that city's taking advantage of the poor. When did the poor get the right to commit crimes? Close quote. So she is correct. There's always a political agenda at work, behind the curtain on this. All right, very quickly here, the lightning rod debate about tribal whale hunting is back in Washington state. The macaws out there on the northwest tip of the state want to hunt a few gray whales. They have treaty rights to do so. Last night was the first chance for the public to testify yay or nay. And here is what people had to say. Como 4's coverage.
The Macaw Indian tribe wants to hunt gray whales again for the first time in a decade. This time, the population of the gray whales is back to healthy levels, and the macaws have a treaty giving them the legal right to hunt. Como 4's Jeff Burnside was at the first of two public hearings on this very emotionally charged issue. Jeff?
Well, the Macaw Nation says it's for subsistence and for cultural reasons. Opponents here tonight say the world has lots of examples of cultural tradition that's still just plain wrong. But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration must make its decision largely on the law and the science. It is brutal, it is bloody, and it is protected by a treaty. As it did in this 1999 video, the Macaw tribe near Nia Bay wants to hunt again, this time 20 gray whales over 5 years. They say it is central to who they are, a tradition for 2,000 years. But Europeans and Russians nearly wiped out the gray whales. Populations went from 20,000 to 2,000, and then under the Endangered Species Act, back to 20,000 now.
Of course, they couldn't speak English, and somebody else was doing it for them.
This Chippewa tribal member supports the macaw's right.
You have destroyed everything everywhere. And now you come to them. Come to them to make it right.
All right, here's one of the NOAA biologists.
Federal regulators have not taken a position yet.
We deliberately did not pick a preferred recommendation because we knew people feel very strongly about that and we didn't want to prejudge it.
Oh, please. We're talking about 4 whales a year out of 20,000. And they have a treaty right. Here is what some Seattle liberal political wizards had to say about all this.
They should perhaps consider what some of the other tribes have done, and that is honor them in a different way.
Also, it's just cruel. It's wrong.
It is disheartening to think that they may be subject to brutal chasing and long, painful deaths.
Gray whales have rebounded only in our region. 2 other populations are either extinct or on the precipice. Regulators must make a decision based on science, not on ethics or morality.
It's in their treaty rights. That's a big thing. We need to honor it.
So there were no macaw here tonight. The next and final public hearing is Wednesday evening in Port Angeles, where the macaw may speak and may find more support than they did here in Seattle tonight. Jeff Burnside, Como 4 News.
I think that is likely. Hour number 3 of the Commute with Carlson, Talk Radio 570 KVI. Right in front of you, David Curley joining us from ABC News. The latest on Baltimore. A huge change today from last night. You'll find out where that change is and why it is likely going to mean not a repeat of last night. That's coming forward in just a few moments here on KVI.